So my task today is to set the stage for the amazing presentations that are going to follow on this webinar. So next slide, Bill. And I'm going to do that by giving you a very quick introduction to what is it that we are aiming to achieve in food security, and paying attention to what are we making any progress, and why is it important to know, and then where evaluation fits in that continuum. Next slide, please. So focusing on community food security, because the evaluation guide is about evaluating outcomes of community food action, and I wanted to focus on the definition of what is it that we mean by community food security. Focusing on the Hammond-Bellows definition, which many people in community use. It speaks to a community that is food secure when all residents obtain a safe, culturally acceptable, nutritionally adequate diet through a sustainable food system that maximizes community self-reliance and social justice. Next slide. There are some really important concepts that are embedded in this definition that I think we should keep at the back of our minds when we are doing our work. It speaks to all residents. It speaks to safe and nutritious food, or the quality of food. It speaks to quantity of food, acceptability of food, particularly cultural acceptability, sustainability of food. So we're not looking at just growing or having food today, but it's also in the future practices, ensuring that that will be viable, and that food comes from self-reliant communities, and that we can all obtain our food without having to compromise our dignity. Next slide. So while we keep those concepts, this is what we are aiming to achieve, but also paying attention to the context that we work in. So I draw on my own experience of working in food security in British Columbia, where food security is a core public health function, and there's an important program that supports community food actions called the Community Food Action Initiative. So in health, we are trying to make a case for community food security. So I did this diagram just to help our health partners understand why this is important. So in health, there is a very well-established understanding that healthy eating reduces chronic diseases and improves population health. So that is not arguable. There's enough ample evidence on that. So then we need to help our health partners understand that healthy eating doesn't happen in isolation. Healthy eating is an integral part of the food system's continuum. So this shows that the food that we produce, process, distribute, market, and make available will influence the food that we consume. So this is also really important, because when we are working, it doesn't matter what we do in community food actions. It could be focusing on production or harvesting of wild and country foods. We have to be able to demonstrate within the health context that it is actually contributing to healthy eating. So next slide. So two things we've talked about: the important concepts and the context that we work in. So then how do we talk about our successes, or what is it that we are achieving? So we need to be able to demonstrate that all people, particularly population groups that are vulnerable to food insecurity or are at a higher risk of chronic diseases, that our work does increase access to the quality of food that they can access, the quantity of food, and the acceptability of food. Not only that, that our work is actually encouraging them to choose these foods, and not only that, that they are actually consuming them. So in common parlance, we used to say, the work that we need to be able to demonstrate is that it's actually landing carrots in people's mouths. So next slide, please. So how do we then communicate that the work that we are doing is actually landing carrots in the mouths of particularly groups of people who are vulnerable to food insecurity. That's where evaluation comes in. So for me, evaluation is primarily about learning from our own work and improving what we do. We cannot assume that just because we're good-hearted and we set out to do good things, that we always achieve good things or that we always move in the right way. And it's okay to make mistakes, but it's important to be able to evaluate so that we learn from it. So primarily, evaluation is about learning, but it's also about accountability, first and foremost to the participants, because when we invite people to participate in a program or project, we need to be able to demonstrate to them that we are actually helping them, that we are not wasting their time. It's also really important to demonstrate accountability to the organization that supports your work. Why is our work important to them? And also funders who fund your programs. We work in an extremely competitive environment. There's not enough money for all the amazing work that happens outside. So why should a funder be supporting your work? It needs to demonstrate some positive changes for the important for their priorities. And evaluation, last but not least, is about promoting your successes. We often talk about anecdotal stories, but there's nothing like seeing something in black and white to tell a good story. Next slide, please. So how do we build in evaluation? And I say there are two broad approaches. One we would call a snapshot evaluation. So that's not a technical term, that's my term. And the other one is ongoing evaluation. Next slide. So snapshot evaluation is evaluation that we undertake at a point in time of a program. So there are lots of programs who will evaluate their programs every 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. That's their chosen strategy. It's usually done by an external party, like a consultant. And so there are real benefits to this. Evaluation is not easy work. It requires specific skills and competencies. Not everybody has this. And there are lots of amazing consultants out there who do wonderful work. So you can bring in that expertise to evaluate your program. And it's also an independent assessment, external set of eyes who will look at your work and hopefully be a bit more objective. But there are challenges to this. And the biggest challenge that I have heard is about the resource implications. Bringing in consultants is resource intensive, and not particularly community-based programs are challenged with it. Lots of people will say, why are we spending money on evaluating when we can use that money on the programs? Well, there are good reasons. We'll talk about it. And of course, one of the biggest issues that I have seen from some of the evaluations, the snapshot type of evaluations that I have participated in, is bias that comes in. I would say particularly in sampling, because when you do snapshot evaluations, oftentimes the respondents are, you're drawing them on their retrospective knowledge of their participation, and so there's a lot of bias in who you can access. Sometimes it's very difficult to engage people who are hard to engage, and so you're asking people to recall information rather than collect it while it's happening. Next slide. So needless to say, I'm a huge proponent of ongoing evaluation or building in evaluation into your work. So I've done this very rudimentary project development cycle to show you that evaluation is an integral component of good program project development. You do needs assessments, you consider all the different options, you choose one or several options, you plan and implement the program, and then it's your opportunity to learn to see how you're doing. And then that becomes the fodder for your next level of assessment that will then continue the program. So ongoing evaluation is part of good program and project development. So next slide. So there are many benefits to building in evaluations, and I will say one of the key benefits is that you can actually include more participants. It happens while the program is running, so pretty much all of your participants can be part of your evaluation. It's also really neat because you can track people's and the program's transformation because you're ongoing looking at the journey of this program, and so you can see transformations. So that gives you more information in a more timely way, expedient feedback that will help you to promote your program more easily. If you're not waiting for 2 years or 5 years to tell your story, you can tell your story pretty much every day because you have, more than anything else, cultivated evaluative minds, because now you have that knowledge of the importance of seeing how you're doing. And I can't say enough about cultivating this evaluative mind because it becomes second nature to you. And in my case, I evaluate even my work every day. I'll say I set out to do this. How am I doing? Am I actually heading in the right direction? What do I need to learn? So it's a really neat way, if nothing else, to live. But there are some challenges. And this is that at least initially, until you come into that evaluative mind stage, it is an extra layer of work. And evaluation requires specific sets of skills and competencies. And, of course, when you're doing the work and evaluating it yourself, there can be some biases because, hey, you know the stuff, right? And sometimes that creates blind spots for us. So that's something to keep in mind and remember. So next slide. So here we have come to ongoing evaluation, and I want to speak a little bit about consistency before I move on. There are organizations and projects and programs that do evaluate, and I've seen many times people taking evaluations apart. They say they're bringing a lot of issues around methodology, tools, data, etc. And by shooting down an evaluation, they also make use of that same information to shoot down the program or the project, which I think is a huge disservice that we do to ourselves. So because of that, I'm a huge proponent of consistent evaluations, and that means similar programs using consistent methods and tools, collecting data in a consistent manner, using similar analyses to create consistencies in program. It's sort of a unified picture of the value of our work. So in a nutshell, it's about creating evaluations that will help us to sing a very important song about community food actions from a common song sheet. And there is an amazing resource out there that can help you all do that. And to talk about that, I'm going to pass on the baton to the next speaker. Thank you.